All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today for this meeting. My name is Alexandra Reloba, and I am a program analyst for the Office of Public School Construction. I am joined today by Lindsay Gordon, who is also a program analyst for OPSC, as well as Jason Hernandez and Keith Jung from our OPSC audits team. We have two presentations for you today regarding the full day kindergarten facilities grant program. The first presentation will be presented by Lindsay and myself, and we will go over recent changes that the program has experienced in the previous few months. And the second presentation will be given by Jason and Keith, who will walk through the K-12 audit process, specifically as it relates to districts who have approved full-day kindergarten projects. We ask that you all please hold your questions until the end of each presentation. So when that time comes, please either insert your question into the chat or use the raise your hand feature. So without further ado, I will kick us off today by giving a brief overview of the changes that our program, FDK, has seen in recent months. So Senate Bill 98 became effective on June 29th, 2020, and it amended the education code governing the full-day kindergarten program to clarify that future funding availability, as well as future establishment of funding rounds to allocate said money, will now be contingent upon appropriation of funding by the legislature, commencing in the 2019-2020 fiscal year. So what this basically amounts to is that Senate Bill 98 rescinded the $300 million in additional program funding that was previously provided to the program by Senate Bill 75 for the 2019-2020 fiscal year. So it's important to note that this Senate Bill 98 did not sunset the full-day kindergarten facilities grant program. So the program is still retains the same eligibility criteria that was established in the previous year, with the most notable examples being that there will be a priority placed upon districts who are applying to convert a full-day or part-day kindergarten project to a full-day kindergarten program, and the 75 state, 25 local matching share requirement for conversion projects were also kept in place. So essentially, this program is not sunsetted, and all the eligibility criteria has remained the same. The only thing that has changed really, or the biggest thing that has changed, is that the program is now contingent upon future funding by the legislature. So to get a little bit more into specifics about the regulation changes that needed to be made in order to reflect the changes brought on by Senate Bill 98, regulations have been amended to remove any reference to funding previously provided from the 2019-2020 budget, so that $300 million that I was discussing before, as well as all references to previous funding rounds that were going to be established to allocate that $300 million have also been removed. So what would have been round 3, round 4, and round 5, the mention of those have been removed. And in its place, the regulations now state that future funding rounds will occur only if the legislature appropriates additional funds to the full-day kindergarten program. And should that happen, new filing rounds will commence within 180 days or 6 months from the date any funds are made available to the program. There are also several minor changes made to the regulations in order to reflect the totality of the changes made by Senate Bill 98, and Lindsay will go into more detail in just a little bit regarding those changes. The last thing I wanted to go through with you all today is to kind of give a visual representation of the biggest changes brought on by Senate Bill 98 to the education code governing the full-day kindergarten program, which is Education Code Section 17375. So as you can see in the first bullet for Section 4A, all reference to the $300 million that was appropriate in the last fiscal year have been removed, and in its place, the statute now states that commencing with the 2019-2020 fiscal year, this program is contingent upon appropriation by the legislature. And then in the second bullet for subsection 4C, all reference to specific fiscal years have been removed as it is unknown if funding will be provided in the future, and if so, when that could be. So the statute has been made more general and therefore more flexible. So now the statute reads that for the first 2 years after any funding has been appropriated in support of this paragraph, funds shall be limited to school sites that did not offer a full-day kindergarten program as of July 1st, 2019. And the school sites must also just use the full-day kinder funding to convert a part-day kindergarten program to a full-day kindergarten program. So that wraps it up for me on my end. Next will be Lindsay Gordon, who will be going through some more specific changes that are going through our full-day kindergarten regulations.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Lindsay Gordon. I'll discuss kind of the subtle changes that were made to our regulations. So the first one is the definition to the new construction project section for 1860.2. This has changed the costs that may be included in your projects to costs that shall be included. So it's that subtle change of language there that represents the legislation change. Okay, and in the retrofit definition, it's similar to new construction, where costs that may be included in projects have now been updated to costs that shall be included. Okay, and a subtle change in the authority reference from Ed Code. It has now specified the subsection of Ed Code that we are referencing, and this subsection is for the free and reduced price meals definition, or the FRPM, which the FDK team uses specifically when it comes to preference points for projects. And this just gives us a more specific authority to use. Okay, and then we also have added the words "the first" in front of apportionment for the fund release process. This is in reference to the timelines that projects have from beginning to end. So when it comes to the timeline of 1 year to submit, or 180 days to submit a fund release form, which is Form 7002, it is from the first apportionment. So the first time that those projects are attending a board. So for current FDK projects, they either went to the May 2019 board or the October 2019 board, and those are the first apportionments for them. Okay, any questions on the FTA changes? Okay, if we don't have any questions now, you feel free to send them in, or at the end of the presentation, you may ask them as well. We can come back to any questions. Now, Jason Hernandez will discuss the K-12 audits.
Okay, good morning. Good morning. Again, my name is Jason Hernandez, and I'm the audit supervisor in charge of the K-12 audit team. And myself, along with Keith Jung, will be presenting the audit portion of this. We will basically go over the reporting requirements for the FDK program and the audit procedures associated with the K-12 Audit Guide, Appendix C, which is specific for the FDK program. Okay, so the first thing is the reporting, the expenditure report and the detailed listing of project expenditure. What was that?
Share your screen, the PowerPoint.
Sharing? Okay.
There you go.
Is it sharing now? Okay. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so the first thing is the SAB 7003, the expenditure report, and the detailed listing of project expenditures. And that's basically the forms that you will use to report everything that was spent on the project, and the DLOP, the detailed listing of project expenditures, is where you'll list the individual project expenditures. And that detail is important, especially for when it comes time to audit. And your local auditor will be looking through there to find whether these expenditures are eligible for the program or not. Okay, so the first on the screen there, you'll see this is a sample of the 7003, the expenditure report. And it has all the basic information. At the top, it has the district name, the school name, district representative, and all the basic information. And then in that section 2, the report period, is where you'll see some of the basic financing for the project. How much district funds were provided on the project, what were the state funds that were apportioned, the total approved project expenditure, in the example, the $2 million, any interest earned on the project, and then your total grant with interest. The amount of expenditures that you spent on the project, and then whether the project had savings or it was overspent. In the example on the screen, you'll see that this particular project had $50,000 in savings. This next one is a sample of the DLOP, the detailed listing of project expenditures. And on here, when you open up the DLOP, there'll be several tabs. There'll be a tab for site, planning, construction. This particular one is a screenshot of the construction tab, where you'll see we have an example of the contractor, the Roberts Construction, the appropriate fund code, the object code, and then what category those expenditures fell under. For the first two, that was the main contractor. There was an amount for other construction, and then you see some amounts for furniture and equipment. And one thing to note that's important too, there in the description of purpose, it's very essential that you list what those expenditures were. You can see that last one on the far right at the bottom for the 5,500, it just has furniture and equipment. And that doesn't give any description for the state, or more importantly, for your local auditor when they're doing a sample of the expenditures for the eligibility. So you want to write down what exactly those were, whether they were desks, whether they were furniture, whatever the case may be. You want to put some detail in there, letting us know exactly what type of expenditure it was. Okay, so the big thing that most people want to know is ineligible expenditures and what's ineligible. The eligible expenditures are per the education code and the FDK regulations, but the best place to look is in your grant agreement in section G. And in there, it'll give you a table of all the basic eligible expenditures that apply to your particular project. And then in the same aspect, for the ineligible expenditures, the very next section in the grant agreement, that section H, has tables listing all the common ineligible expenditures. So you'll see things on there such as the computers, the printers, and the computer carts, golf carts. You'll see some of the other ones, school maintenance equipment, band equipment, athletic team supplies, even interest from local bonds that was charged to the FDK project are all examples of ineligible expenditures. And again, those are things that you'll find in those tables, so they're a very valuable resource for the district. Just a real quick example. Here's the section G. It goes through the various type of costs. This one on the screen is for design costs. You'll see some of it'll list the type of costs. For example, in row B there, it has the architect fees for planning, the education code section that pertains to it, and it goes down the line letting you know what costs are your typical eligible costs in a school construction project. Then if you go onto the next screen, you have your section H, which is the ineligible expenditures, and it's giving you some of your most common ineligible expenditures. It goes through there, like for the building cost, what it includes, the type of costs, and then what type of costs are ineligible. Okay, A lot of questions we get a lot of times too is what are some common reporting areas, or what are issues that we come across? And we get those questions from districts and also from the CPAs themselves as they're starting to work through the audits for the districts. Some of the big things that we see, the site expenditures. We've come across hazardous waste expenses after the site was cleared. We've had an all clear letter from the Department of Toxic Substance Control, the DTSC, and there's been additional expenditures after that. Sometimes we get miscategorized site expenditures where you might have some hazardous waste expenditures listed under the DTSC fees. So those are some things that pop up as well. Another important thing is no expenditures or no description, like I mentioned earlier, of the expenditures, which makes it really difficult if we don't have the invoice or the contract available to look at and decide what type of expenditure is that an expenditure that potentially is ineligible for the program or not. So it's important to have that description in your DLOP, in your detailed listing of project expenditures. Also, expenditures outside the 1 year window, that timeline. Because for the FDK program, all expenditures have to be made within that 1 year. Anything beyond that, even if it would normally be ineligible, if it was a normal building construction type expenditure from your main contractor, but it was outside the window, then it wouldn't be eligible. Exception to that, I did mention the main contractor, if it's under contract prior to that year. So they're just finishing up the work on that contract that you signed during the eligible 1 year time period, then those additional expenditures are still eligible, as long as it was under contract prior to that year. It's just anything new that happens outside the 1 year contract would not be considered eligible because it would be outside the time window. Interest costs from a local bond charged to the project. We've seen loan initiation fees from a certificate participation. Those type of administration fees are not eligible for the program as well. Okay, so the big question is then what can you do if you aren't sure about a particular eligibility of one particular type of expenditure? Well, you can contact OPSC for clarification. That could be as simple as a quick phone call or an email. Keith and myself, during the week, we get many phone calls from the districts, from the CPAs, getting some clarification on certain type of expenditures. So we're always happy to help you walk through any type of expenditure you're not sure about. If you want something in writing, then you can request a formal response on a particular questionable expenditure. And that way you'll have that response from the Office of Public School Construction when it comes time for the local auditor to come in and do the closeout audit as well. One of the big things, you can request a review of your 7003 and your detailed listing of project expenditures prior to submitting your final expenditure report. In fact, we highly recommend that if there's anything that you're not sure about, because you want to report all your project expenditures. You don't want to stop reporting right when you reach the project amount, the grant plus the district contribution. You want to report 100% of all the eligible project expenditures. So you can submit a request. We call it a soft review because we're not looking at any documents. We're not looking at any contracts or invoices. That will be done at audit by the local auditor. We're just basically looking at all the type of expenditures you have listed on your expenditure report, a description of those expenditures, and seeing if anything pops out as potentially a red flag or something that might be questionable. We can let you know about that. We'll respond back to you in writing, and you'll have that as well. And that'll give you an opportunity to update your expenditure report and your DLOP if you need to for any reason before you submit that final expenditure report. Because once you submit the final expenditure report to the state, to our office, at that point, per the Education Code 41024, it's final. And once it's final, no updates can be made to it. So again, we highly recommend that you submit a request for that soft review ahead of time. That way, if anything pops up, if any of your numbers are not footing back to the 70-03, anything, we can let you know that we see when we do that soft review. Okay, and next, Keith Jung will come up and he will talk to you about the audit cycle and basically the rest of the audit process now that you're ready to submit that final expenditure report to the state.
Okay, thank you very much, Jason, for going over the reporting process. And I'm just going to kind of start from where Jason is leaving off, and that's where Basically, you need to have your audit done now. You've done all your reporting, you've gotten down to the final expenditure report, and we're going to talk a little bit about the audit process. A lot of it is going to be very familiar to some of you if you've been involved in a school facility program audit, the SFP program. A lot of things are very similar. We'll talk a little bit too about a few specific things that are different related to FDK, but a lot of the process, if you've been through SFP, it'll be very familiar. First of all, just want to give you a kind of an overview of the life cycle related to K-12 audit. The first box, we talk about you've turned in your final SAB 7003, so that final expenditure report. That's going to trigger the closeout audit. It's going to start a timeline, and basically OPSC is going to go ahead and send you a letter, let you know that an audit needs to be done by a local auditor, CPA firm, within 1 year of that time. The local auditor will use an audit guide that we have provided. We have an Appendix B and an Appendix C. Appendix B is for the SFP program, Appendix C for the FDK program. It gives them the guidelines on what they need to do related to the audit. And when they're completed with their audit report, they're going to submit that report to the State Controller's Office and the Department of Education. And State Controller's Office is responsible for reviewing that report, certifying it. They make sure that all the components that are necessary to be in the report are in there, that they follow the standards of auditing that need to be done there. And then if they do have any findings, a district still has an appeal process that's been in place, the same one from that was in the past. There's a 60-day window to file an appeal with the Education Audit Appeals Panel, known as EAP, after the audit's certified, and that's the way to resolve any findings that maybe a district might have a disagreement with. But if that's not the case, basically, or if there is no findings, the SCO, their review and certification, will finalize that audit. They'll provide OPSC a copy of that report, and OPSC will be involved in the process of either collecting funds for any ineligible expenditures tied to audit findings, or if there's grant adjustments, those would also be worked with the State Allocation Board. But those are things that would be worked out with OPSC and the State Allocation Board. And at that point, your process would be completed. Now, here is this slide is, we start getting in a little bit more of the detail related to the audit requirements. So as I mentioned, on the EAP website, there is both the actually that contains also all the audit instructions for full financial audit of a district. But related to OPSC, we have an Appendix B and an Appendix C. Appendix B will relate to if you have an SFP audit, and Appendix C is a newly developed appendix. Now has audit requirements related specifically to the FDK program. And it'll apply to all the projects funded on or after May 22nd, 2019. FDK projects have 1 year from the date of the final fund release to expend funds, and then to submit that final expenditure report, that 7003. And then, as we talked about, the audit report will be due 1 year from the final submission of the 7003 expenditure report to the Office of Public School Construction. CPAs will do these audits under the guidelines of what's called the Yellow Book in governmental auditing circles, the Yellow Book standards for performance audits. That's what they'll use in relation to the review of your project. I mentioned a little earlier, a lot of this, some of you have been with us on when we've done some presentations and other things related to the auditing of the SFP program. Very similar principles related to the auditing of various construction components and things of that nature, eligibility of expenditures. But two things we kind of want to call out here a little bit more that just to make you aware of related to FDK is one, our office worked with the Department of Education to get in the CSAM, the California School Accounting Manual, we got a resource code set up. So for those of you who are involved very much in the accounting of these funds, resource code 7700 was specifically established through a recent process to account for those FDK funds. So that's where you would use that code in relation to recording the monies coming in, expenditures going out. So that's an important one to be aware of, is that new resource code for the funds. And also related to FDK savings, we wanted to go over a few things. Savings for a non-financial hardship project that can be used for high priority capital facility needs of the district if spent within 1 year of the project completion. Now, any savings remaining after that 1 year, that's going to need to be returned to the state for projects funded on or prior to October 23rd, 2019. So you have that 1 year for that. And then if it's a financial hardship project, those are basically considered unspent funds at the end, and those would just need to be returned to the state. Now we get in a little bit to some of the tools that we have available for you on our website and the DGS OPSC website, things that you'll be able to use that CPAs will use to do the audits, that districts can look up their the status on their projects and work with their CPAs on. So we have what's known as a K12 Audit Resource that's actually going to be in the DGS OPSC website. We're going to show you some screenshots in just a minute here. But what is going to be on there are some tools you can use, some things that the CPAs will use, templates for their report, guidance on things on how to do the audit. We also have on there's going to basically be 3 types of audits that can come up related to your FDK project. And we're going to have the inventory of those audits that need to be done. And we already have that on our website now for SFP. This has been going on pretty strong for us for a while with that. But 3 types of audits that you'll see reports on related to listing the districts and kind of if they're needing one of those audits. There's one that's called a reduction of cost incurred audit, also known as RCIs. What those are basically projects that they didn't go to completion, but there were still expenditures related to those, and those will need to be audited. There's your basic closeout audit. That's what you're going to see the most often, which is basically you get funded for a project, the project gets completed, and there's a final 7003, and then we have basically a basic regular closeout audit. So that's when a project's been completed. And of course, all of those expenditures would need to be audited. The other type of audit would be a savings audit. And as we mentioned in the slide related to savings, if there is savings on a project, you've got 1 year to use those dollars on high priority capital needs. And of course, the use of those savings would need to be audited to make sure all of those expenditures are in fact eligible expenditures. This next slide, now we get a little bit more into the screenshots. If you were to go into our DGS OPSC website and then get into what's called the K12 Audit Resource tab, that you'll see that's at the bottom of this slide. So basically we have some different things that would show up, different type of resources that are available in the OPSC website. And you can see at the bottom, there's one called the K12 Audit Resource. So if you hit that, then you'll come up into this area and this will show up. And you can see on this slide, this will take you into here where you can see up in the upper left-hand corner, you can see Jason's name up there. And he is basically, he's the main person responsible for a lot of the K12 work in our office, and he heads that up. So his name will be there. This K12 Audit Resources. So you'll see when we talked about refreshable reports, and right now this is a screenshot that has a lot of the things related to SFP, but we're going to be having a lot of the FDK process just beginning. We're going to get those workload reports on there too. So those are going to have refreshable reports on there too, where you can see the status of different reports related to FDK on these audits. We'll also have the appendixes will be there. There's different templates that are necessary for the CPAs to use. There'll be templates for both the reporting of different things by districts and then also templates that are used by CPAs in their audit. Different tools, things like frequently asked questions about the audits, that's available for you too. And one last thing that I'll kind of point you to, you can see right above where it says K12 Audit Resources, there's K12 Audit Workshop. We've actually put some of our, we put past workshops that we've done related to SFP. I think we're going to have different things related to FDK also. You'll be able to see presentations like this if related specifically even to FDK related to auditing, and those will be past workshops we've done if you wanted to get even more detail about the programs and things we've talked about before, also with PowerPoint slides. So those are available for you as tools to use for both the districts and the CPAs. So as we come to the end of we're getting now to the end of our presentation on the fiscal side related to reporting and auditing. Just a few ending reminders, some things that we want to make sure that probably the biggest things we want you to be aware of as we conclude our part is one, always related to accountability of funds, reporting, auditing, the importance of good record keeping, having good audit trails available, your expenditures backed up with source documentation. That's how you're gonna get through the whole process of reporting and auditing. You're always going to get through much more quicker and efficiently, of course, if you have good records. So we always want to make sure that you have the good accountability over the records, even when we mention things like that new code of 7700 that's set up in the CSAM, that you're making sure that your funds are accounted for in that way. Jason mentioned this earlier about the grant agreement, the Appendix G, the Appendix H. The office has done a lot of work in going through and talking about what are eligible expenditures, what are ineligible expenditures in those appendixes. Refer to those often. If you have questions, take a look at those, and before you get into reporting your expenditures, make sure you have a good awareness of that. But even with everything that we're saying there's going to be questions that come up, maybe about your record keeping, how to report, eligibility. That's what Jason mentioned also, that he and I, we get a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails about expenditures and things like that. And we're very happy to get into dialogue with you about those questions and give you some guidance and some assistance. So please use us at OPSC and we'll be giving you a slide that'll have even more contact information for you, specifics on that. But don't be afraid to ask those questions when you're not sure. Jason also mentioned that issue of the soft review, which is basically meaning that you've, before you're turning in your final 7003 expenditure report, as he mentioned, when that goes final, that is the one that will be audited by the CPA firm. And it's not a process where you could come back 3 months later and say, oh, well, we had a bunch of things that we shouldn't have put down, or we need to add things. It doesn't, the process is basically when you send in a final, it's final, and that's the one that'll be audited. So we give this mechanism in our office. If you would like what's called a soft review before you turn in your final, send that in to us, and we'll have an opportunity to point out anything that we see that could be helpful to you, and making sure that the final product that you have is what you want it to be. Of course, that's not a review where we're looking at the full documentation like a CPA firm would do, but we can provide some assistance in that area. And then the last step, of course, is you're going to, after you go through all of these different things, you're going to make arrangements with the CPA firm to have that FDK audit completed and submitted to the SCO within 1 year from the final submission of that final 7003. So that would be your step there. And many of you are familiar with that kind of process, going through it with SFP. So now it's just this program needing its own audit, FDK, and a lot of the same types of procedures as you went through with SFP. Contact information. First of all, just a few people to be aware of, specific individuals for different things in the process that we talked about today. You're going to have your audit report reviewed and certified by the State Controller's Office when it's done. And Irina Bush at the SCO, she would be your main contact on that. If you had any audit findings and you were going through an audit finding appeal process, that's handled by the Education Audit Appeals Panel, EAP, and their executive officer is Mary Kelly, and her phone number is there. And then if you had any questions about paying back monies to the state related to ineligible expenditures, that's actually handled by our Office of Public School Construction, and Paula, our accounting administrator, she'd be happy to help you with that. She would give you guidance in that area. And then, as we mentioned, we've got many of us who are involved in this process of the audits, helping you with questions related to your reporting, even as you get further into the audit process, things like eligibility of expenditures, the soft review, things of that nature. So Jason's contact info is up there. Suzanne Reese is our operations manager, and she can also help you with issues. Hung has just joined us on some of our work that we do, and he's another fiscal supervisor in audits. And then I also work with this team related to questions and things of that nature. So my contact information is also there, available for you also. And now our time for any questions. So if anyone had any questions or things that had come up on the chat line, we can address those now on the fiscal side. If there wasn't any questions on our side or anything else, yeah, related to us, that would complete the fiscal side of the presentation.
Hello, everyone, again. Believe that there was one question in the chat asking, bottom line, there is no money for this program. At this time, we do not have any, no additional funds are available for the program. We're working right now on the rounds 1 and rounds 2, which have already been approved. So at this time, there is no additional money for the program, but that is contingent upon future appropriation by the legislature. So I hope I answered that question. Is there any other questions about the programmatic side or the fiscal services side before we wrap up today? There is a second question I see on when do you see any money being assigned to this program? We cannot say. We are unsure of the timeline. We kind of know what everyone knows. We will keep our eye open, but we're waiting on movement by the legislature for that matter.
Alexandra, this is Rebecca Curley with Coalition for Adequate School Housing. I just wanted to say that, we were disappointed when the money was swept from the program because we understand the need for it. But that being said, we certainly appreciate the work that your team has done to quickly roll out this program when we have the funds available, to do all the really hard work to get it put together, and to also address a lot of the stakeholder concerns through the process. So I'm pleased to kind of see you all continuing to be really responsive to the changes that the legislature has created. And we do look forward to future funding rounds, and just appreciate all the work that you and your team have done.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And yeah, we will keep an eye out, and we're always happy to answer any questions that may arise at any point. So thank you very much for that. And I see that there is another question for a district like ours who have established full day kindergarten. The funding will not come before districts that do not have full day kindergarten in place, correct? Yes, so for the statute language right now, funding will be limited at least for 2 years following initial appropriation of additional funds, funding will be limited just to districts that are converting a part day program to a full day kindergarten program. We don't have more information about if maybe that would be opened up at a later date, but we will keep our eye out for more movement on that front. Are there any other questions for right now? Seeing one more, school districts who were given a grant are expected to still receive the funds, or are those grants no longer valid? So projects that were approved in rounds 1 and rounds 2 will still receive that funding, as it was tied to the initial $100 million that was provided to the program. So that money is already accounted for. So those districts will still be receiving those funds should they meet all the necessary requirements for fund release, which we are happy to also, if there are any questions about that, please feel free to reach out to myself or Lindsay Gordon at any time for questions regarding fund release requirements. Right. Not seeing anything else at this moment, but if there is, please feel free to contact myself and Lindsay Gordon, as well as the program supervisor, Joshua Potter. Our contact information can be found on the OPSC website. We did want to mention real quick before we go that we are intending to bring the regulation changes that we discussed at the beginning of this meeting to the October State Allocation Board for their approval. And I believe the meeting is scheduled right now for October 28th. So if there are any questions or comments about these regulation changes, then please contact the full day kindergarten team, which again is myself, Lindsay Gordon, and Joshua Potter by Monday, October 12th, so that we have adequate time to respond and process the comments. So thank you all very much for attending and for your questions and interest into the program. We're happy to answer any questions that come up through email or through calling. Thank you all again for attending, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.